Lots of people have been talking about this on all the short form, platforms, TikTok, Reels, YouTube Shorts. A lot of people complaining about the Gen Z stare. I guess I should start. If you don't know what the Gen Z stare is, here's what the Gen Z stare is. The Gen Z stare is basically people in Gen Z who seem to be a bit socially awkward, in the sense that you will walk in, say there's a Gen Z person working at a coffee shop or whatever, and you go in, you're like, yeah, can I get a latte, please? And they just kind of give this like that's the impression that everybody does of the Gen Z stare. It's definitely a thing. I've experienced it. I've seen it many times where I'll ask a very simple question to a Gen Zer and they just kind of deer in headlights with me. And I'm like, we all right? You okay there? But it's something that a lot of people are complaining about. A lot of people are, talking about it on these platforms and whatnot. And the Gen Zers are now like, clapping back and saying, no, we're not doing that because we're awkward or weird. We're doing it because you're being stupid. And that's we don't, that's why we're giving you that look, because you're being stupid. Generational warfare, also known as the customer service stare. So, look, before I get into this, let me make something perfectly clear in terms of how I feel about this. Generational hate, especially hate toward the younger generation, is stupid. It's just flat out stupid. It's always stupid. First of all, there's nothing unique or interesting or original about it at all. Every generation has suffered the ire of the older generations as they came down. I certainly did as a Gen Xer. We were called shiftless and lazy and entitled and stuff. You can find literally Roman poets 2,000 years ago complaining about how lazy and entitled and unmotivated the youth are. So I think it's just called being young. But the biggest thing to me is like, you're complaining about a generation that you raised. So whose fault is it? Like, especially, on the right, you always hear people, complaining about participation trophies. Like that's such a trope now, or a meme. Like, oh, these kids with their participation trophies and they all think they're so entitled and stuff. They didn't give themselves participation trophies, right? Like that wasn't something they did. That was something that we did, and now we're complaining about it. Do you see how dumb that is? Also, when people call like the younger generation stupid or say something about how dumb they are and stuff, it's like, yes, they're stupid. They're young. They have not experienced life yet. There's a lot of stuff that they don't know yet. There's core life experiences that anybody over 30 has experienced and understood that they haven't had yet. They are stupid. Not intelligent stupid, just life experience stupid. I was dumb. Shit, I'm still pretty dumb. So like, sort of side tangent. I'm sort of on tangent cam, so why not? I had a foreign exchange student that stayed with us this last year. My host daughter, closest thing I've ever had to an actual kid. I love her to death. But we had some conversations about that because she's 17 years old and she had the self-awareness to know that she was kind of overdramatic and that everything was the end of the world, like that's how it is when you're a teenager. Everything's the end of the world. Everything is the biggest, most important thing that ever happened. She was one of those few people that was aware enough to know that she was like that, and she didn't like it. I remember we had a conversation one time and she was like, I can't wait to not be like that, or why am I like that, But what I said to her was, here's how I think it works, is that when you're a teenager, you think you know everything. And here's the deal. You do. You know everything. You know everything there is to know about like that world that you live in, that kid world that you live in. I mean, I don't know what the kids are doing in high school, what they're listening to, what they're saying, what's important to them and the trends and the fashion. I don't know any of that stuff. I'm completely detached from it. But they are experts in that. And they should be. It's their entire world. It's what they know. But what happens is, you know everything in your teenage years, and then you get into your 20s and you suddenly realize, oh, I really didn't know anything. I'm actually kind of an idiot because you're not in that kid world anymore. When you're a kid, you are graded on a curve. There's people that are there to support you. I mean, if you commit a crime, you don't get like an adult offense unless it's like particularly heinous or whatever. But, when you're a kid, like the world kind of morphs itself, to help you out a little bit. Once you're in your 20s, in this weird like 5-year span, suddenly you are just supposed to know everything. And suddenly you're an adult and suddenly you've got to act like an adult. And it's a particularly rough time of life because you're just getting started in your career. If you are lucky enough to even have a job, you're working super entry-level stuff. You're not getting paid very well. Most people, myself included, in my 20s, I had many jobs. I didn't have any like one good solid job. And the world does not like morph itself for you anymore. Suddenly you are supposed to function in this new world with new rules. And you have to learn all those rules on the fly. And our education system does not prepare you for that in any way, shape, or form. You know when the Gettysburg Address was given, but you don't know how to, balance a checkbook, that kind of thing. And that's kind of where Gen Z is now. They're getting into those years and they're realizing that like, oh, life is actually quite a bit harder. Anyway, the point I'm making there is I have a soft spot for all the generations when they're in their 20s because it's just a really rough time. But Gen Z specifically and the Gen Z stare, I find it endlessly fascinating. This isn't the kind of thing that I would normally make a video about or talk about, but I find this particularly interesting as somebody who covers society, who covers technology and the advancing of technology. I've been saying on my channel for years that it's going to be interesting seeing how this new generation comes up who kind of grew up on social media. I was saying somewhere that Gen X, which is my generation, we were the last generation to grow up without the internet. People got squishy with me about that because there was internet, but it's not like the internet. We had a internet, but not the internet. So we grew up without the internet. We were the last analog generation. The millennials grew up with the internet, sort of that first generation of internet, and then Gen Zers are the first ones who grew up with like social media and smartphones. And like all this time I've been like, what's this generation going to be like? What's it going to be? Like this is such a transformative and weird new way of communicating and everything. Like, how is this going to affect the generations that are coming up? And we're starting to see that. And the Gen Zers that are in that little narrow slice right there, they also suffered from what happened during COVID and some of their prime socializing years. In their mid to late teens, they were shut into their house for a couple of years. So the fact that anybody is shocked that people in that sort of like mini generation right there in that little 5-year period, the fact that they're a little bit awkward in socializing and stuff, why would anybody be surprised by that? I would be surprised if they weren't. I will say, as a guy with a lot of gray in my beard now, that's something that's endlessly frustrating for me is watching people act surprised at things that they really shouldn't be surprised by. It's kind of obvious that something like this would happen. Why are we shocked by it? I just keep seeing that repeated over and over again. Now there's the attacks on Gen Z, which I don't think is cool. But then there's the Gen Z clapback of, oh no, it's because you're stupid. This is where I've got to be a little bit of a prick. You sweet summer child. No, it's not the customer service stare that you're giving us. What you're doing is not the customer service stare. We are well familiar with the customer service stare. Anybody over 30, any of the olds like myself, we all grew up and had to do those shitty customer service jobs. I did many of them. All of us know the experience of an entitled, stupid customer coming in and asking a question so dumb that your brain just melts out of your ear and you just cannot form words. We've all had that experience. We know what that is. Yeah, this ain't that. This ain't that. This is when somebody asks just a very basic small talk, hello kind of, how are you kind of question, and the person just does not know how to respond to you. And it usually comes off as really annoyed or even, entitled, maybe for lack of a better word. But something else I've learned in my many, many years on this planet is that a lot of times entitlement and arrogance, it's not really what it looks like. I believe that most people operate functionally at their core from insecurity. That is kind of what guides most of our actions. It's what makes us awkward. It's what makes us kind of lash out. It's things underneath that are painful to us that we wind up externalizing, and that externalization winds up looking like, entitlement or arrogance. So, you have this generation who is like very comfortable communicating through devices and through platforms and stuff like that. And they're not used to communicating in person. So, and again, like they went through a period there where like their core socialization years were spent locked up in a home, and so they're used to communicating through devices. So you go up and you try to start a conversation or just say like a pleasantry or whatever, and they kind of give you this stare because like they really functionally don't quite know how to be in that situation. And sometimes, psychologically we can feel a little bit of anger from that. It's like you're making me feel this way. It's like it's not just that I feel kind of weird in this situation. It's like you're making me weird. You're making me feel this way. That's something that we all do psychologically. I think there might be elements of that. I don't mean to be like armchair psychologist here or anything, but I think that could be part of it. But another thing that I think is worth talking about, and I haven't heard anybody else like really bring this up in the whole Gen Z stare conversation, is maybe this is the future. Maybe this is how people are going to be going forward. We're going to be a lot more comfortable communicating through, social media platforms and stuff. And again, this is why I find this whole topic so fascinating. It's not just about like, these youngins and they're weird. And no, it's really not that. It's a lot more of like, society has changed so much, so fast. Technology, especially communication technology, has changed so much, so fast in the last 10 years or so, that the differences in communication styles specifically, but in general, but the differences between the generations are widening because our experiences of the world and how we go through it and how we, communicate with people, it's so much more different between those generations. And to continue what I was saying earlier about like Gen X being analog, millennials first on the internet, Gen Z first on social media. Well, now we have Gen Alpha coming up with AI. Like they're a generation that has never known what it's like to not have AI. What's that going to produce? Am I about to break into We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel? Is that where this is going? But for real though, these changes are going to continue. These gaps between generations, I think, are going to widen as technology continues to speed up. And maybe this is something we need to get used to. I don't see people wisening up and suddenly being like, oh yeah, we need to like look at the societal implications of blah, blah, blah. And people aren't going to suddenly be all empathetic with younger generations. That we're going to continue hating on younger generations because it's just what we seem to do. But I find it dumb to do that. I'm more like interested in it as in a sociological perspective. Like why are these kids like this? Like why are they so awkward and having trouble in this department? But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Other than again, don't hate on the younger generation. Like guide them. Don't hate a generation that you raised because you're the ones that did that. So look at yourself, bro. I will end it, actually. I think I'll end it by saying to Gen Zers that I got your back. I really do. I really do. And anybody that wants to hate on you can stick something really spiky up their own butts. But I will say the whole weird communication thing, it is something you do. Obviously, I'm speaking in generalities. Not everybody, does the same thing. But it is something you do, and I would suggest that it's something that you work on. If it's something that it does, if you do kind of freeze up in social settings, it is something that you probably need to work on because interpersonal communication is super important. That is another thing I've learned in all my years, like being able to communicate well, being able to win people over to your side. It's a super important thing to be able to do. So I don't blame you for the way you are. Of course, everybody that's in Gen Z and watching this is like, that's not me. That's not me. But I don't blame you for it. But I do think it is, it's kind of where you landed. It's kind of what happened to you. Sorry. But it is something that you probably should work on. And just excusing it as something that is not helpful. So that's my criticism. But I got your back, Gen Z. I promise. Every generation is weird in a different way, and we're weird because of the generation that came before us. It was all foisted on us, and we're all just riding the wave. And this is the new wave. So, the new wave. Gen Z. New wave Gen Z. Play some Duran Duran or whatever. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Please share in the comments if you agree. Let's try to keep the hate to a minimum. If you are Gen Z, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Hopefully you appreciate where I'm coming from. I am on your side, I promise. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Hope you all are doing well. Love you all. Catch you next time.